Evik Sorrel had spent most of the morning trying not to stare at the sword. It lay across the demonstration table at the front of Gallery 9, surrounded by devices that made it look even more ridiculous. To its left sat a compact gravitic restraint unit with 3 redundant safety fields. To its right rested a training pulse emitter capable of identifying a target, calculating distance, compensating for movement, and refusing to fire if its sensors detected an unprotected student. The sword did none of those things. It did not glow. It did not hum. It did not identify its owner. It did not know whether someone holding it was trained, angry, frightened, reckless, or asleep. It was a narrow piece of carefully shaped metal with a dark grip and a simple guard between hand and blade. Primitive was the polite word. Dangerously unsupervised was the one Evik preferred. Professor Istran Cole apparently disagreed. The purpose of comparative conflict studies, Cole said, as he paced slowly across the front of the classroom, is not to decide which civilization developed the most impressive weapon. His silver-gray facial tendrils shifted as he spoke. It is to understand why a civilization believed a particular weapon solved a particular problem. The Academy projection behind him displayed a sequence of historical tools from 12 member worlds. Stone blades, weighted clubs, mechanical bows, chemical projectors, early projectile weapons, powered armor, then starship-scale systems. Evik barely looked at them. His eyes kept returning to the human sword. So did everyone else. There were 24 students in Gallery 9 that morning, representing 9 species and enough different evolutionary histories to make the Academy's furniture department permanently unhappy. Some had chairs. Some used suspended platforms. One student from a low-gravity world sat inside a support frame that resembled a decorative cage. Kasha Wren, the only human in the room, sat in an ordinary chair. She was directly beside the demonstration table. That was not unusual. Kasha had spent most of the week helping Professor Cole prepare the human section of the course. What Evik found unusual was how little interest she seemed to have in the weapon supposedly representing thousands of years of her species' history. She leaned back in her seat, one ankle crossed over the other. Her academy jacket hung from the back of her chair. The sleeves of her gray uniform shirt were rolled neatly to her elbows. A thin black training guard covered her right wrist. Her dark hair had been tied back. She looked relaxed. Too relaxed. Evik had known Kasha for 11 weeks, which was long enough to learn that humans became most suspicious when they looked as if nothing interesting was happening. Professor Cole touched the projection control. The image above him changed. A line appeared. Human weapons development. It began with sharpened stone and ended with orbital defense platforms. The sword occupied only a tiny portion of the timeline. Evik raised one hand. Cole pointed toward him. Yes, Evik. If humans abandoned these weapons centuries before joining interstellar society, why are we spending an entire class on them? Kasha turned her head. Several students looked relieved someone else had asked. Evik continued. I understand historical value, but from a practical perspective, the object has been surpassed in every measurable category. Professor Cole folded both of his upper hands. Kasha. Evik's crest warmed. He had not asked her. Kasha looked at the projection. Then at him. Depends what you're measuring. Range. Worse. Stopping capability. Usually worse. Target acquisition. Non-existent. Safety systems. Kasha glanced at the sword. It has a handle. A few students laughed. Evik did not. That is not a safety system. It keeps your hand away from the sharp part. More laughter. Even Professor Cole's tendrils tightened in amusement. Evik stared at her. Kasha finally sat forward. All right, serious answer. That would be appreciated. Modern tools are better at modern jobs, she said. Nobody's arguing otherwise. She pointed toward the projection. But old tools can teach you what technology eventually hides. Evik frowned. Hides distance, timing, balance, commitment, the fact that every action costs something. Professor Cole nodded approvingly. Kasha continued. With a smart weapon, the machine corrects half your mistakes before you even notice you made them. With something mechanical, there's nothing between your decision and the result. Evik considered that. So humans preserve inefficiency as education. That is the most alien way anyone has ever described practice. A student near the back laughed so loudly, her translator briefly cut out. Professor Cole raised a hand. Kasha has been helping reconstruct several traditional training methods for this module. Today, she will demonstrate basic handling principles. Kasha sighed dramatically. I knew there was a reason you made me show up early. You volunteered. I was manipulated by academic enthusiasm. You requested extra credit. That too. Cole gestured toward the sword. Would you? Kasha stood. The room quieted almost immediately. That annoyed Evik. Nothing had happened. Kasha had simply walked 3 steps toward a table. Still, attention followed her. She lifted the sword carefully. Not dramatically. Both hands, one near the grip, the other supporting the sheathed blade. Then she turned toward the class. This is Academy property, she said. Blunted demonstration edge, weighted to approximate a traditional training weapon. She looked toward Professor Cole. And because apparently someone tried to imitate a human action drama during last term's weapons unit, every head turned toward a blue-scaled student in the second row. He lowered his face into his hands. Kasha smiled. Professor Cole would like me to remind everyone that watching 600 hours of movies does not qualify you to swing this. Cole added, anyone attempting unsupervised replication fails the module. See educational. Kasha removed the sheath. The blade caught the overhead light. Evik had expected the class to react. He had not expected himself to. There was nothing special about the sword. Nothing. Yet the instant Kasha held it properly, the object stopped looking historical. It became understandable. That disturbed him. He had seen weapons with enough processing power to predict movement before a target consciously decided where to go. Those had not bothered him. This did. Because the sword had no intelligence at all. Every dangerous part of it existed in the person holding it. Kasha angled the blade downward. Professor Cole activated a holographic training marker. Distance first, Kasha said. The marker moved. Kasha moved with it. Slowly. Demonstration speed. She explained each adjustment before making it. Why she stepped sideways rather than backward. Why she kept the point away from the class. Why the hands did not move independently from the body. Evik found himself paying attention despite his objections. You're not watching the sword, Kasha said. He blinked. She was looking directly at him. What? You're tracking the blade. Obviously. That's usually late. She tapped one shoulder. Watch here. Then her hips. Here. Then her feet. The weapon only goes where the person already decided to send it. Evik leaned forward. So the body reveals the action. Often. That seems inefficient. Kasha smiled. Everything is inefficient if you're comparing it to a computer. Professor Cole changed the hologram. A second marker appeared. Kasha repositioned. Again, Cole said to the class, the purpose is not to teach sword combat. Observe the decision process. Kasha lifted the blade, and every light in Gallery 9 went out. The projection vanished. The sword disappeared into darkness. For 1 second, Evik assumed Professor Cole had done it intentionally. Then ventilation stopped. The quiet became total. Not classroom quiet. Structural quiet. The vast academy normally vibrated faintly with air systems, lift tracks, power distribution, distant machinery, and thousands of people living inside a station designed never to become silent. Now Evik could hear his own breathing. Someone dropped a stylus. It struck the floor. 3 students laughed nervously. Professor Cole did not. Remain seated. Emergency lighting should have activated immediately. It did not. A red strip along the wall flashed once, then went black. Evik stood without realizing he had done it. Professor! Cole crossed toward the door panel. Its display was dead. He pressed the manual release. Nothing. Power failure, someone asked. No. Cole's answer came too quickly. Evik felt cold. Professor Cole touched the panel again. Station power failures trigger independent emergency circuits. Kasia had not moved from the front of the room. The sword was still in her hands. In the darkness, Evik could barely see her silhouette. What kills both? She asked. Cole looked toward her. A localized suppression field. The class went silent. Then something struck the other side of the door. The impact shook the frame. Several students screamed. A second impact followed. Harder. The locking mechanism sparked. Kasia moved instantly. Not toward the door. Toward the class. Back from the entrance. Professor Cole reacted a moment later. Everyone to the rear half of the gallery. Students began moving. Desks scraped. Someone knocked over a chair. Evik helped a smaller classmate from her support platform. A third impact hit the door. The upper hinge twisted. Cole reached the manual emergency cabinet. It had a mechanical latch. He opened it. Inside were respirators, light sticks, medical packs, and nothing capable of stopping whoever was outside. The fourth impact tore the door inward. Dark armored figures filled the opening. There were 4. The first entered with a compact weapon raised. The second carried a long case against one hip. The third held a rectangular device connected to a heavy power pack. A dull red indicator glowed on its side. The fourth remained partly in the corridor, watching behind them. No academy insignia. No security markings. Their armor was mismatched but professionally maintained. This was not panic. This was preparation. Professor Cole stepped forward. The lead attacker's helmet turned toward him. Istran Cole. The translator rendered the voice as flat and metallic. Identify yourself. Cole's tendrils tightened. You know who I am. Step forward. Students pressed toward the rear wall. Evik felt someone grab the back of his uniform. He did not look. The attacker raised his weapon. We are not here for the students. Cole glanced toward the class. What do you want? You. The word seemed to remove the last hope of misunderstanding. This was an extraction. Someone had invaded Lumacrest Interstellar Academy specifically to take their professor. Cole straightened, then released the students first. No. A low sound moved through the room. The second attacker entered fully. The third positioned the suppression device beside the damaged door. Its red indicator remained steady. The leader looked around Gallery 9. Communication is blocked. Automated security is offline. Doors, tracking nodes, local defense systems, and powered emergency equipment are suppressed. Evik understood the pride beneath the statement. They had not simply attacked. They had designed the attack around the academy itself. Lumacrest was one of the safest educational institutions in the system precisely because everything was connected. Every hallway was monitored. Every classroom possessed automated containment. Every instructor carried an emergency transmitter. Security drones could cross an academic wing within seconds. Unless none of those systems worked, the attackers had turned the academy's sophistication into silence. We leave with Cole, the leader continued, and no student needs to be injured. He looked toward the professor. Move. Cole did not. The weapon rose, and then the attacker noticed Kasia. Everyone had been looking at the intruders. Kasha had been looking at the room, at the doors, the device, the windows, the students, the distances between desks. Only then did she look at the attackers. The lead one stared at the blade in her hands. His helmet tilted. "What is that?" Kasha looked down as if he had asked about her shoes. "A sword." The attacker seemed to wait for the translator to correct itself. It did not. "A ceremonial object." "Not exactly." The second attacker leaned toward the first. "Human." That word carried something Evik recognized. Not fear. Recognition. Humans were new enough to the broader academic community that stories had outrun understanding. The leader studied Kasha more carefully. Then the dead displays. Then the sword again. "Put it on the floor." Kasha's eyes moved toward the suppression device, then toward the black classroom terminals, then back to the weapon in her hands. The corner of her mouth lifted. Evik stared at her. She was smiling, not because she thought this was funny, because she had understood something. The attacker had not. "You shut down everything electronic," Kasha said. "Yes." She looked at the sword. Her smile widened slightly. "That's unfortunate." Her thumbs shifted. Steel whispered against the sheath as she drew the blade fully free. Even in the darkness, the sound seemed impossibly clear. The leader leveled his weapon. "Put it down." Kasha stepped between him and Professor Cole. "No." Professor Cole whispered her name. Kasha never looked away from the attacker. "Professor, move the class back." "You cannot." "Please." Something in her tone decided it. Cole retreated. The students followed. Evik did not know why he expected Kasha to say something heroic. Perhaps because stories demanded speeches. She offered none. She simply stood there, holding an obsolete piece of metal. The attacker advanced. "Final warning." Kasha lowered the blade slightly. "Then stop coming closer." The leader moved. So did she. Evik had watched competitive combat simulations. He expected speed. What startled him was restraint. Kasha did not charge. She stepped sideways. The attacker tried to bring his weapon around. Kasha struck the barrel with the flat of the sword. The shot fired high. A flash illuminated the room. The bolt hit the ceiling and shattered a lighting panel. Students screamed. Kasha immediately retreated 2 steps. The attacker followed. Evik realized what she was doing. She was pulling him away from Carl. The second attacker noticed too. "Take the professor." He moved left. Kasha changed direction. The leader blocked her. For several seconds, the classroom dissolved into noise. Metal struck weapon casing. Desks scraped. Students shouted. Kasha moved around the demonstration table, keeping it between herself and the second attacker. She looked nothing like the slow demonstration from minutes earlier. But Evik could still see the same principles. Distance, timing, commitment, the things she had said modern technology hid. The attacker thrust the weapon toward her. Kasha was already moving before the barrel aligned. Not because she was faster, because she had watched his shoulders, his hips, his feet. Evik understood. Then the lead attacker changed tactics. Instead of trying to shoot, he used the weapon itself. He struck Kasha's shoulder with the stock. The impact sent her into a desk. She gasped. The sword dipped. Evik's stomach dropped. Kasha pushed herself upright. The attacker hit her again. This time, she barely avoided the full force. The stories Evik had heard about humans suddenly became useless. Deathworlders were supposed to ignore injury. They were supposed to be impossibly strong. They were supposed to turn every crisis into a humiliating lesson for everyone foolish enough to challenge them. Kasha looked hurt. Her right arm moved more stiffly. She was breathing harder. Human, not legend. The leader saw it too. His confidence returned. You cannot stop four of us. Kasha backed toward the center aisle. I know. The answer confused him. It confused Evik. You cannot defeat us. I know. The attacker hesitated. Kasha glanced behind him. Toward the class. Evik finally understood. She was not trying to defeat them. She was buying time. Time for what? Everyone behind her was still crouched in fear. Cole was trying to keep students together. Ressa, seated near Evik, had both hands over her translator collar, as if holding it could make the outside world hear them. Nobody had a plan. They were waiting for Kasha. Evik felt suddenly ashamed. Kasha blocked another advance. The sword struck an armored forearm. Not cutting, turning, redirecting, making space. A third attacker moved toward Professor Cole. Kasha could not reach him. Cole retreated. The attacker followed. Evik looked around. There had to be something. Anything. The classroom had been designed for demonstrations. Half the wall panels were dead. Powered locks were useless. Projectors useless. Communication useless. He looked toward the rear preparation section. A folding divider separated Gallery 9 from the equipment storage area during practical lessons. Normally, it opened automatically, but because the academy required evacuation capability during power failures, it also had a manual lever. Evik stared. A mechanical lever. He grabbed Professor Cole's sleeve. The professor turned. Evik pointed. Cole saw it. His eyes widened. Ressa, he whispered. She looked over. Help Evik. They moved low behind the desks. Kasha blocked another advance. The lead attacker drove her backward. She struck at his weapon. He pulled away. Primitive, he snapped. Kasha gave him a breathless smile. You keep saying that like it means useless. At the rear wall, Evik reached the divider control. He pulled. Nothing happened. Panic hit him. Then Cole grabbed the secondary release beside it. Both. They pulled together. Something heavy clicked inside the wall. The divider shifted. Slowly. Only a few centimeters. But it moved. Evik almost laughed. They pulled harder. The divider slid farther. Ressa joined them. Across the room, one attacker noticed. What are they doing? Kasha looked over. Her eyes found Evik. For a moment, surprise crossed her face. Then approval. Keep going. The leader struck at her. Kasha raised the sword. The impact rattled through her injured arm. Her grip failed. The sword hit the floor. Everything stopped inside Evik. The leader kicked the blade away. It slid beneath a row of desks. Kasha stepped backward. The attacker aimed at her chest. Now he said, "You are unarmed." Kasha looked at the sword. Then at him. No. Evik stared. Kasha had nothing in her hands. The attacker seemed equally confused. Kasha moved around the demonstration table. He tracked her. She kept moving. Not attacking. Not surrendering. Forcing him to spend attention on her. That was when Evik understood the answer. The weapon was not the plan. The plan was time. Pull, Evik said. Ressa grabbed the lever again. Professor Cole joined. The divider moved farther across the room. Students began noticing. A four-armed cadet crawled over. What are we doing? Changing the room. That is not an answer. Then pull. He did. Another student joined. The divider groaned. One of the intruders broke away from Kasha. He headed toward the students. Professor Cole stepped forward. The attacker grabbed him. No. Ressa lunged. Evik caught her arm. The attacker pulled Cole toward the door. Kasha tried to intercept. The leader blocked her. The sword was still beyond reach. The second attacker moved to help secure Cole. The extraction was happening. All their effort had bought seconds. Nothing more. Evik looked at the suppression device. It remained beside the door. Red indicator glowing. The blackout depended on it. He looked at the moving divider. Its path crossed within a short distance of the device. Not enough. Unless. Move the tables. Ressa looked at him. What? Toward the center, make them go around. She understood. 3 students pushed. The nearest desk shifted. Then another. A heavy demonstration bench scraped sideways. The attacker's clear route narrowed. Kasia saw it immediately. She backed toward the center. The leader followed. Exactly where she wanted him. Evik felt something change. This was no longer one human protecting a room. It was a room learning how to protect itself. Professor Cole twisted in the attacker's grip. Ressa shoved a table between them. The attacker stumbled. Cole fell against the floor. 2 students dragged him back. Another student rolled a chair into the path of the second intruder. The attacker kicked it aside. But that cost another second. Kasia ducked low, reached beneath the desk. Her fingers found the sword. She pulled it free. The blade returned to her hand. The leader recoiled. This time he did not laugh. Kasia rose. Her shoulder clearly hurt. Her breathing was uneven, but her stance settled. Everyone stay behind the divider. The students obeyed, not because they had frozen again, because now they understood their jobs. 1 continued pulling. 2 moved furniture. Ressa helped Professor Cole. Evik watched the suppression device. The attacker guarding it realized what was happening. He grabbed the power pack. Heavy. Portable did not mean light. He dragged it toward the corridor. The divider continued moving. Too slowly. We're not going to reach it, Ressa said. Evik looked at the tables. Then the divider. Then the device. We don't have to. He pointed. Push that bench. The 4-armed student understood first. He put both upper arms against the heavy bench. 2 others joined. They pushed. The bench moved across the floor. The attacker near the door saw it. He pulled the suppression unit harder. The cable snagged beneath the damaged doorframe. He looked down. That instant was enough. The bench struck the power module. Not hard enough to break it. Hard enough to knock it sideways. The red indicator flickered. Every light in the classroom flashed, then died again. The attacker swore. Again, Evik shouted. Students pushed. The bench struck the module a second time. The indicator blinked. Gallery 9's wall display attempted to reboot. A single line of text appeared. System. Darkness. The lead attacker finally understood the danger. Stop them. He moved toward Evik. Kasia stepped into the aisle. Sword raised. He stopped. Not because she was stronger. Because moving through her would cost time he no longer had. You should have stayed out of this, he said. Kasia breathed hard. You came into my classroom. It is not yours. Kasia glanced toward the students. It is today. The attacker lunged. Kasia moved sideways. Metal struck metal. He forced her backward. Evik pulled the divider. Students shoved the bench. The suppression unit tipped. Its red indicator went dark. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the academy came back to life. Emergency strips ignited along every wall. Ventilation roared. Displays flashed. The door control screamed an error warning. A station-wide alarm exploded through Gallery 9. Several students covered their ears. Security messages filled the wall terminals. Professor Cole slammed his palm onto the emergency panel. Gallery 9, armed extraction, students present. A response came immediately. Gallery 9 confirmed. Response teams approaching from both junctions. The attackers froze. Their perfect plan had lasted less than 10 minutes. Now the academy knew exactly where they were. Move, the leader shouted. The attacker nearest the door abandoned the suppression unit. 2 others headed into the corridor. The leader backed away from Kasia. She did not pursue. That surprised Evik. She could have. Instead, she lowered the sword slightly and stepped toward Professor Call, protecting the objective, not chasing the enemy. The attackers reached the doorway. The leader almost followed. Then he looked back. Evik would later wonder whether pride had made the decision. Perhaps he could not accept that a group of students had undone an operation planned well enough to blind an academy. Perhaps Kasia's refusal to fear him mattered more than escape. Whatever the reason, he turned toward Professor Call and charged. Kasia intercepted him. This exchange was shorter than the others. The attacker tried to bring his weapon around. Kasia struck the side. The weapon hit the floor. He grabbed for her injured arm. She twisted away. He stumbled into the demonstration table. Kasia moved behind him. The sword came up, stopped. The blunted edge rested against the armored gap beside his shoulder. The attacker froze. Kasia's face was pale now. Her arm trembled. She could have struck again. She did not. Security boots thundered from the corridor. Kasia looked at him. Done. The attacker did not answer. She pressed the sword forward a fraction. Done. His hands slowly opened. Yes. Kasia stepped away immediately. No triumph. No final blow. No insult. Nothing. Security flooded the room. The attacker was pushed to the floor, restrained, scanned, and dragged away from the students. Kasia lowered the sword. Evik suddenly realized the entire classroom was staring at her. Kasia looked around. What? Then her knees nearly gave way. A security officer caught her. Professor Call moved forward. Kasia, I'm okay. A medic entered behind the security team. He scanned her. No. Kasia frowned. No what? You are not okay. I'm standing. You are currently being held upright by an officer. Kasia glanced sideways. The officer still had one hand under her arm. Technicality. The medic examined her shoulder. Kasia winced. Evik saw it. For some reason, that small reaction mattered. She had been afraid. She had been hurt. She had not been a machine. Evik crossed the room. Kasia. She turned. You good? He stared at her. You are asking me. You look worse. I was behind a table. You still look worse. Evik opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Kasia looked toward the damaged divider. Then the suppression device lying on its side. Then at the students. You pulled the manual partition. Evik nodded and hit the field unit. With assistance. Good. That is all. Kasia blinked. What else should I say? I do not know, something human. She smiled tiredly. Nice wall. Evik laughed before he could stop himself. The sound came out half hysterical. Ressa joined him. Then another student. Within seconds, half the room was laughing because none of them knew what else to do with the fear leaving their bodies. Professor Cole leaned against a desk. Even he laughed once. The medic pointed toward the door. We are going. Kasia sighed. Yes, doctor. I am a senior emergency technician. Yes, senior emergency technician. As the medic led her away, Evik called after her. Kasia. She turned. He hesitated. There were too many things to say. He chose the simplest. Thank you. Kasia looked at him for a moment, then shook her head. You helped. That is not the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. Then she disappeared into the corridor. By sunset, the story had already become a lie. Not an intentional lie. Something worse. A legend. The first version Evik heard claimed Kasia had defeated 6 attackers. There had been 4. The second said she had severed the suppression device with the sword. She had never touched it. The third insisted the attackers fled because the humans smiled at them. Technically, one had looked uncomfortable. That was not the same thing. The fourth version somehow involved Kasia catching a pulse shot on the blade. Evik became angry at that one. That did not happen. The student telling it looked disappointed. But someone from Gallery 9 said, "I was in Gallery 9. The student stared at him. "Oh." Evik folded his arms. She did not block energy with metal. What did she do? Evik opened his mouth. He expected the answer to be simple. She fought. She protected us. She bought time. But none of those were complete. She kept the attackers busy, he said finally. That sounds less impressive. It was more impressive. The student did not understand. Evik walked away. The academy closed the entire academic wing for investigation. Students were moved into temporary quarters. Professor Cole spent most of the night being interviewed by security. Kasia spent 3 hours in medical observation. Her shoulder was badly bruised but not seriously damaged. She had several smaller injuries, exhaustion, and a cut near one eyebrow from hitting the desk. None were dramatic. That disappointed the rumor network. By morning, people were claiming human bones must be flexible enough to absorb weapon strikes. Kasia posted a 2-line message to the student forum. "My bones are normal. Please stop inventing biology." That slowed nothing. Evik visited her after classes. The medical observation room contained 6 beds. Kasia occupied the only one with snacks arranged across the blanket. "Bribes?" Evik asked. She looked up. "People keep bringing food." "Why?" "Apparently humans need feeding after combat." "Do you?" "Everyone needs feeding eventually." Evik considered this. "I brought nothing." "Then you're my favorite visitor." He sat beside the bed. Kasia's right arm rested in a flexible support wrap. Evik looked at it. She noticed. "It's fine. You said that yesterday. And I was mostly right." The medic strongly disagreed. The medic had a professional bias. Evik was quiet. Kasia waited. Finally he asked, "Were you afraid?" Her expression changed. Not offended. Thoughtful. "Yes." The answer came immediately. Evik had expected hesitation. "You smiled." "That wasn't because I wasn't scared." "Then why?" Kasia leaned back. "Because their field knocked out every powered system in the room. I noticed. And I was holding the one weapon that didn't care. So you found their mistake amusing." "Very." Evik looked down at his hands. "I thought the smile meant you knew you could defeat them." Kasia laughed softly. "I knew nothing of the sort. You stood in front of them. Someone had to. You expected to lose." "I expected 4 armed adults to be difficult." Evik stared at her. "Your species tells stories incorrectly. Our species tells stories constantly. That is not a defense." "Nope." He hesitated. "When you lost the sword." Kasia looked toward him. "I thought it was over." "So did I." Evik blinked. "You did." "Of course. But you told him you were not disarmed." Kasia smiled. "I was being annoying." "That was strategy." "It often is." Evik made a frustrated sound. Kasia laughed again, then winced and adjusted her shoulder. He waited. The room became quieter. "Why did you not chase them?" Evik asked. "Because they were leaving." "But they attacked us." "Yes." "You could have stopped another." "Maybe." "Then why not?" Kasia stared at him as if the answer should have been obvious. "Because you were behind me." Evik said nothing. Kasia continued. "My job wasn't to punish them, it was to keep them away from you." Something in his chest tightened. "You keep calling it your job." Figure of speech. "You are a student. So are you." I hid. At first, I froze. At first, I waited for you to fix everything. Kasha's face lost its amusement. And then, Evik looked at her. You told me to pull the divider. No, you found the divider. He frowned. You shouted at me to keep pulling. That part I'll take credit for. You make the distinction sound important. It is. Kasha shifted upright. When something bad happens, people tend to remember whoever stood at the front. That doesn't mean the people behind them did nothing. We almost did. But you didn't. Evik thought about the moment the class changed. Ressa pushing tables. Professor Cole using the manual release. The four-armed student moving the bench. Another student guiding smaller classmates behind the divider. Nobody had looked heroic. Nobody had been smiling. They had just begun doing useful things. Kasha pointed toward his hands. You pulled that wall until your palms split. Evik looked down. Thin healing strips covered both hands. He had barely noticed. That is not comparable to standing in front of a weapon. It doesn't have to be. The door opened. Professor Cole entered. Kasha groaned. If you brought homework, leave. I brought your module assessment. Worse. Cole handed her a tablet. The screen was active again. Kasha looked at it. Then at him. You gave me an incomplete. You failed to complete the scheduled demonstration. Our classroom got invaded. I am aware. You were there. I was. Kasha narrowed her eyes. Evik looked between them. Professor Cole's tendrils shifted. Then Kasha laughed. You're joking. I have been told humor aids recovery. You're terrible at it. So I am learning. Cole placed the tablet on the table. His expression became more serious. Security believes the group was hired to seize research access connected to my previous work. Kasha stopped smiling. Are they coming back? Not likely. That isn't no. No, Cole admitted. It is not. Evik sat straighter. Cole continued. The Academy has increased security. More importantly, the suppression technology used in the attack is now understood. Kasha glanced toward Evik. Powered backup for powered backup. Cole sighed. There will be changes. Evik immediately thought of rewritten policies. New drills. Special human exceptions. Kasha seemed to think the same thing. Don't turn Gallery 9 into some Deathworld training program. Cole looked offended. I had no intention of doing so. Good. We are adding manual communication devices. Also good. Mechanical door releases will be inspected more often. Excellent. And the administration would like to recognize. Kasha pointed at him. No, you do not yet know what I was going to say. I know that tone. Evik almost smiled. Cole folded his hands. The class is being commended collectively. Kasha lowered her finger. Oh, you expected otherwise. Yes. Cole's tendrils tightened. So did I. That afternoon, Kasha was discharged. By the next day, nearly the entire academy knew her name. That made things worse. Students Evik had never seen before waited near corridor intersections to watch her pass. Some moved away. Others moved closer. One asked for a photograph with the sword. Kasha stared at him until he apologized. The weapon itself remained sealed in Gallery 9's evidence locker until investigators finished examining the classroom. Kasha did not ask for it. Evik found that surprising. You don't want it back. It isn't mine. You fought with it. Still not mine. Humans do not assign emotional significance to weapons used in dangerous events. Oh, we absolutely do. Then why not this one? Kasha considered. Because making it special would mean the wrong lesson won. Evik frowned. What lesson? That the sword saved us. It did. No, it clearly did. It helped. That distinction again. Yes. Kasia stopped walking. They stood outside the temporary classroom assigned to their group. Suppose I'd been holding a chair. Evik looked at her. A chair would have been worse. Much worse. But I still would have tried to make time. You could not have done what you did with a chair. No. So the sword mattered. Yes. You are contradicting yourself. I'm saying the sword mattered without being the whole story. Evik remained unconvinced. Kasia sighed. They shut down technology because they thought technology was the only thing that could oppose them. The sword proved that assumption wrong. That sounds significant. It was. But if everyone in that room had stayed frozen, the sword eventually wouldn't have mattered either. Evik had no answer. Kasia opened the classroom door. Come on. Temporary lessons were boring. That felt wonderful. For 2 days, nobody was attacked. Nobody shut down power. Nobody attempted to kidnap Professor Cole. Kasia complained about assignments. Ressa forgot a research project. Evik failed a navigation simulation because he mixed 2 unit systems. The academy slowly became ordinary again. Then Gallery 9 reopened. 3 days after the attack, Professor Cole sent the class a message. Comparative conflict studies resumes at original location. Standard schedule. Evik read the message twice. Ressa sent him a private note. He cannot be serious. He answered. He is. A moment later. Is Kasia going? Evik looked across the dining hall. Kasia was arguing with an automated dispenser. Why is this called tea? The dispenser replied in a pleasant voice. Beverage classification, tea. This is purple. Color does not alter classification. It smells like a battery. Your complaint has been recorded. Evik looked back at Ressa's message. Yes. Gallery 9 looked almost normal. The damaged door had been replaced. The scorched ceiling panel was gone. Several desks were new. A faint rectangular mark on the floor showed where investigators had removed the suppression device. The divider had been repaired. Evik arrived early. He stood beside the manual lever. Professor Cole noticed. It has been inspected. I know. Twice. I know. You are pulling it anyway, aren't you? Yes. Evik pulled. The divider moved smoothly. He pushed it back. Cole said nothing. Ressa arrived next. Then the others. Conversation remained subdued. Everyone noticed the demonstration table. Everyone noticed the locked storage cabinet behind it. The sword had been returned that morning. Academy property. Evidence released. Classroom equipment again. No plaque. No display. No special case. Evik found himself relieved. Kasia arrived last. She stepped through the repaired doorway wearing her academy jacket properly for once. Her shoulder was still slightly stiff. Conversation stopped. She looked around. No. Nobody spoke. Kasia pointed at the room. We are not doing the weird silence thing. Ressa laughed. Several others followed. The tension broke. Kasia walked toward her usual chair. Construction staff had pushed it too close to the wall. Evik stood. He moved the chair aside. Kasia paused. Thanks. You are welcome. She sat. Professor Cole waited until everyone was ready. Then he activated the projector. It worked immediately. The same historical sequence appeared over the table. Stone, wood, bronze, iron, steel, chemical weapons, projectiles, energy systems, orbital platforms. Cole looked across the class. Where were we? Nobody answered. Then Kasia raised her hand. Cole pointed toward her. You were explaining, she said, why people keep old tools after inventing better ones. Professor Cole glanced toward the locked cabinet. Was I? You were about to. Then perhaps we should continue. Evik raised his hand. Cole pointed at him. I have a correction. To what? My statement from the previous lesson. Professor Cole waited. Evik looked toward Kasha. Then the cabinet. I said the sword had been surpassed in every measurable category. Kasha smiled slightly. It mostly has. That is not my correction. Go ahead. Evik searched for the right words. Technology can surpass a tool without replacing every circumstance in which the tool remains useful. Professor Cole tilted his head. Better. Kasha leaned back. Very academic. I attend an academy. Tragic. Several students laughed. Professor Cole changed the projection. Today, he said, we will discuss redundancy. A few students immediately glanced toward Kasha. She noticed. Oh, come on. Cole ignored her. Not specifically human redundancy. Kasha relaxed. Thank you. Civilizational redundancy. The projection showed a starship navigation network, then older manual systems beneath it. Every culture develops layers of technology. Mature systems often hide older methods rather than eliminating them entirely. Evik listened. The class felt different now, not because everyone believed humans were invincible. The opposite. They had seen Kasha hurt. They had watched her lose the sword. They had watched an attacker knock her down. The Deathworld myth had become smaller. Kasha had become larger. Not a species. Not a legend. A student who had recognized one useful fact before the attackers did, then held the line until everyone else could recognize another. Halfway through the lesson, Professor Cole opened the storage cabinet. Evik heard several students inhale. Cole removed the sword. He placed it on the demonstration table. Kasha did not reach for it. Cole looked around. Before the interruption, Kasha was explaining that old tools can expose principles modern systems conceal. He looked toward her. Would you like to finish? Kasha stared at the sword, then at him. Do I get the extra credit? Yes. She stood, walked forward, picked it up. No one flinched. That mattered. Kasha held the sheathed sword across both hands. Where were we? Evik answered. Distance. She nodded. Right. She drew the sword. This time, nobody screamed. No doors broke. No lights died. The blade entered the open air of an ordinary classroom. Kasha showed them how balance shifted, how movement began before the weapon itself moved, how a person could create distance instead of always closing it, how the most important choice in a confrontation was sometimes deciding not to continue one. Evik watched her feet, her shoulders, her hands, not merely the sword. When the demonstration finished, Kasha returned the weapon to its sheath. She handed it to Professor Cole. He placed it back in storage. The cabinet closed. Locked. The lesson moved on. By the final half hour, they were discussing autonomous defense networks. The sword was forgotten. That felt right too. When the class ended, students gathered their tablets and bags. Ressa complained about an assignment. Professor Cole reminded them twice about the deadline. Kasha put on her jacket. Evik moved aside to let another student pass behind his chair. The room emptied slowly. Kasha reached the doorway. Stopped. Looked back. Evik followed her gaze. The demonstration table. The repaired divider. The closed storage cabinet. Nothing extraordinary. Just a classroom. Coming, Evik asked. Kasha nodded. Yeah. They stepped into the corridor. Behind them, the final student exited. The repaired door slid shut. This time it locked exactly as designed. And nobody looked back.